Welcome to the CPO series, where world-class chief product officers share their knowledge and experience in growing their teams, growing their companies, and growing their careers. I'm your host, Becky Flint, the founder and CEO of Dragonboat. So a word about Dragonboat. Dragonboat is a responsive product portfolio platform for CPOs and their teams. It is actually a secret weapon for business leaders who want to make smarter decisions about their product portfolio and stay focused on reaching their goals. Market-leading companies use Dragonboat across more than 60 countries to achieve the outcome their business need by shipping the right product faster and more effectively. So to know more, check out dragonboat.io CPO/CPO. So without further ado, I am excited to get started. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Perry Steinberg, who has been multi-time CPOs and a multi-time Dragonboat customer. Perry is a customer-centric technology executive with 30 years of experience scaling and transforming global business. Perry has experience at all levels of software development, from vision and strategy to planning and execution. In his current role as Chief Product Officer of Symphony Talent, he leads a global product management, product operations, user design, engineering, and architecture team. Perry has aligned Symphony Talent customer business needs with product and engineering's ability to deliver technology solutions and to achieve business outcomes we all need, right, in today's world. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Perry. You want to give us a couple of intro about your background and what excites you, and as a multi-time as Chief Product Officer, the good and bad and ugly you are going to bring and help the rest of the organization and Chief Product Officers do better.
Becky, I really appreciate the warm welcome, and I'm excited to be back on the CPO series. Like you had said, and thank you for a very warm welcome. I've spent the last 30 years in product management, working in various industries from med tech to legal tech and now HR tech. And what I love about being able to go to different industries, but more importantly, it's about the product portfolio approach. Everything from when I was working in med tech in a $6 billion market cap company to now working in a private equity-backed company, really aligning the business strategy with the product portfolio management approach is something that I love doing, and something that the companies struggle to do. The last two companies had no product roadmaps when I came there, and they defined what they were doing as true agile, and putting together a roadmap, working with engineering on level of efforts, working with the executive team on really focusing what is the business strategy, and then aligning the two is something that I'm passionate about. And more importantly, now within HR tech and working for a company whose mission is to empower every company and every candidate to find the jobs that they love. It's that mission-driven approach and that mission-driven strategy that is exciting when you start looking at the roadmaps that we build out to align with that. So I'm really excited about being able to spend some time with you, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So I'm just going to bring up the agenda today very briefly. About the topic today is about product portfolio approach in scaling, the solution to address some of the operational chaos, misalignment, bottlenecks to drive optimal outcomes. I know there's a lot more to talk about. There's so much to unpack. So I'm actually going to just show a couple of key points that we're going to touch upon. And then I'm going to turn off the sharing, and then we just have a conversation here. And then for audience, if you have a question, please do type into the chat so we can address them as they come along. So as you can see, we talk a little bit about the when and why to use the portfolio approach, and how to connect and align all areas of your business, and some of the tips and lessons learned throughout the journey. So I'm going to get off and get started. So let's talk about a little bit, Perry, before we get started earlier. That portfolio management definitely is a very valuable and effective tool for chief product officers. But there are some stages to be said before we can get started into that using that tool. So would love to hear your thoughts on what are the sort of the setting and the when and the why.
Yeah, I think that very similar to what we were talking about prior to kicking off the podcast, the webinar series. It's really important for the leadership team to have a clear understanding of the market dynamics, clear understanding of the business impacts that they're trying to drive, and then an articulated strategy. What are the priorities for the organization that align with that strategy? And as I've started, especially most recently at Symphony Talent, it's been a very interesting time when you think about kind of what's happened to the business cycles, like we were talking about before. Starting in 2019, everything was relatively normal, and COVID has changed the market dynamics. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, and the cycles that have occurred really since 2019, almost no one could have impacted. And when we think about our business strategy and our product management and our portfolio approach at Symphony Talent, really it starts at that level, and then we kind of drill down from there.
I think you brought up something very interesting. There are always, and you can call it black swan events or otherwise that we didn't anticipate. And then as we handling that, we tend to be overblown in one direction or the other, right? So I think when those events happen, especially as such a seasoned executive in different product areas and size of the company, what are some of the tips you think about in terms of how, when unexpected happens at this scale, how would you think about the business strategy that you need to adjust, and how would you adjust your sort of the portfolio construct, if anything?
Yeah, I think it all starts with what are the major MBOs or OKRs that the leadership team is trying to target, tying back to what's going on within the business and the market as a whole, and making sure that the leadership team is continuously evaluating those OKRs for the business. And as these externalities or external events are occurring, to make sure that we're still aligned. And at Symphony Talent, we review them on a quarterly basis, and make adjustments if need be. We have four very clear objectives that we want to hit, and we're always coming back to those. We have customers that are going through upgrades. We have customer definitions to impact churn. We look at new logos, and then reduction of technical debt is something that's critical, that always ties back to those business cycles.
Right. You actually brought up something very interesting, which is how portfolio approach is slightly different model, right? Obviously, typically when we think about portfolio management, especially in the product organization, you tend to think about this market, this product, this area, right? And then you actually taking the responsive product portfolio management approach. If I would have laid the words on it, the terminology, right? In a few ways. One is when it comes to portfolio management, not only you look at a team and an allocation from that perspective, you think about different goals, right? Different OKRs or MP goals. And then you think about how you actually allocate different efforts and initiative to the goals. And that's a very unique way that we start to have it today versus the previous generations. Portfolio management is really about, you have 5 product lines and everyone gets a certain amount of allocation, right? So this is it's a very interesting, and it seems to work much better in a way where you always put an outcome on top, and then to say, okay, in terms of tech debt or in terms of customer retention, that really give you an opportunity and ability to adjust to the changing environment, regardless it's COVID or whatnot. So what are some of the core? I'm sure it can be interesting conversation when you from goals, right, and the allocation, and to actually translating to your product roadmaps. What does the process look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting about kind of my journey in particular over the past, call it 10 years, is that I have seen the good, bad, and the ugly. And the ugly is walking into a situation, either starting a new job or actually even acquiring another company, which I've done on multiple occasions over the past few years. And there's zero approach. And it's, previously it's in my last company, engineers would just be building whatever they're going to be building. And so now taking a step back and actually, like you said, defining what those goals and OKRs are right from the start. And then all of a sudden the mind shift of definitely the product managers, but a product manager leads, and a lot of times they're leading without direct responsibility or anyone reporting to them. They're leading the product owners, they're leading the designers, they're leading the engineers, they're leading the architects. And being able to have a portfolio management approach allows the product manager to have context of what they're doing and being able to tie back to their OKRs. So the ugly is walking into a situation where there is no goals and objectives, and engineers are just building whatever they're building, and product managers are firefighting. And that's also, bad, because they are achieving results because they're producing stuff, but it's not tied to anything. There's really no true objectives to that. And the good is actually, I've been fortunate enough to use Dragon Boat to align those two. But really, it starts with working with the product team as well as the executive team as a CPO to truly define what the OKRs are, and then making sure that all the development that we're doing tracked in Jira, integrated into to Dragon Boat and a portfolio management tool that allows the organization, definitely the product manager, but the organization as a whole, to see the whole portfolio and how the development is occurring for each OKR that is set by the executive team.
Right. I think there's something you mentioned a very interesting. I want to double click on that. Is that you spend a lot of time defining OKR. I think people tend to forget that part. Sometimes it's invisible to, maybe not visible to engineers, maybe not visible to everyone in the company. But the defining and aligning OKR is such a strategically impactful and important activity. I'm sure you also run into scenarios, probably you have a little bit fight, right? To say how much is support sales, how much is support new product, how much is support, like you also have to fight for having space for tech debt. So a little bit tip from you, how do you, what are the common sort of challenges you walk in the room to see sort of aligning strategy and OKRs across probably competing needs and competing teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to the strategy. And once the leadership team is aligned around kind of what those objectives are from a strategy perspective, and then looking and questioning each other as an executive team. And we actually just recently went through this from a Symphony Talent perspective. We all got into a room and hashed it out. And once you start at the top and start peeling back the onion, and making sure that all the decisions that we're making from an investment allocation perspective supports the ultimate goal and strategy, it really goes down to linking up the projects that you're running back to the strategy and back to the corporate objectives, and getting all on the same page from an executive team. And if the executive team is not on the same page, that's where it's both ugly and bad, because the rest of the organization, be it in sales, be it in account management, and obviously within product development, aren't aligned. And you could see it. And who gets impacted? Yes, the shareholders are impacted, but also the customers, and probably more importantly, because the customers see it, the clients see it in ugly ways if we're not aligned as an executive team.
Right. It's a really, really cool. I think that, sort of the traditional, we call it strategic planning, in some ways to really connect to how, from the goals and strategy to product roadmaps. Now, also tied to something, and I want to call out, is that a lot of times when you go from executive team to the team, there's a middle layer, right? So the middle layer, you can call it product operations or VP or director of product. Quite often they would be doing some sort of the orchestration, because even you have a nice, cleanly laid out goal and a strategy, the execution itself, it can be messy. Meaning you would need, for example, multiple teams to support one initiative, right? So the resourcing and the prioritization become much more hairy. In a way, I could have initiative that support a goal, that initiative support require multiple product managers, and then their area to support it, and everyone has their own goals, and then you get a little messy there. I mean, obviously, I personally experienced a lot. That's why Dragon Boat come about. Would love to hear from you some of the learning and tricks and how you make it work, and driving sort of from a strategic alignment to the actual execution, product management, prioritization.
Yeah, I've read a lot of books about the siloed nature of many businesses,
Right.
and that exists. It's going to exist, and it's our job as leaders to break down those silos. And if you're interested in hearing about different books, I'll you and I could talk about the various books, but the key to me, both from a product development lifecycle perspective and a software development lifecycle perspective, is to break down those silos. And I think it starts with a lot of meetings. I know people don't like meetings, but at the end of the day, when we're all in our silos, you're not going to have Jira tickets floating back and forth or Slack messages back and forth and truly get that alignment. If the team is working effectively, Jira and Slack, Google Meets, it's fine. It works great. However, to get that initial alignment, it really is important to get in a room, get on a call, get on a whiteboard like the one behind me, and start drawing out exactly kind of what does the flow look like, and get that collaboration. Both at my last 3 companies, we implemented a complete product development lifecycle, including a go-to-market focus with all key stakeholders across the board. And the great thing about a tool like Dragon Boat is you actually could then show in one clear, concise manner how all the work that product development is doing ties back to the objectives. And even within that go-to-market cross-functional team, showing that and getting that alignment is critical, because it improves transparency, which is the key to breaking down those silos.
That is really cool. So there's a question from someone about using, can you take product portfolio management without a tool? I would love to hear your thoughts, and then I definitely have a pretty strong opinion on that.
Obviously, the short answer is yes, right? And I think when you and I first met, I worked with your team. I'm a whiz at Excel, and I had 3 or 4 different sheets. Each sheet had 12 different tabs on it, and it would all came to. And my graphs and my charts were amazing. So you could do it that way. I've also had people that I've worked for who had really cool PowerPoint slides with some spreadsheets behind it, but it was not tied to anything underneath that. It was just really, really pretty. So it's hard, it's challenging, and it's not flexible, meaning if there's a change, you got to figure out of the 4 spreadsheets and 15 different tabs, where to make the change and how does it flow through. So to me, like, you can't do it really effectively without a tool.
Right. I think you mentioned something very interesting. I think this word, if I were to say, is become a more and more specialized, right? The reason is like, are you in the business of hacking up you will always use a tool. Even pen and paper is tool, right? It's just not a purpose-built tool. But are you really in the business of trying to build a product portfolio management tool that works and scales, or you rather spend the time to build the product that you're in the business for? That, I think that's really more of the focus. I think a lot of bigger companies in the past, they build their own tools to support their needs, right? I mean, but then that become you can't think about this as a business process API, and they become something else standalone, like Okta. Why did Okta exist? You can create Okta yourself. Why you have to, you can create, launch darkly feature management. Like, you can create everything like yourself. But that's not a business you're in, right? You cannot compete with the others when everyone else have better tool than you. When you try to compete that in the core business, you are competing with them in. Then actually it's a good segue to talk about the changing nature of our world. Obviously, pandemic is one example. It just happened, and then definitely turn our entire ecosystem and the world upside down. when Dragon Boat started, we were remote only. We don't have office. That was sort of our secret competitive advantage. Now everyone is a remote, and good, bad, right? It's the effect of life, and then it really changed a lot of things, the Zooms and so on. So that definitely had a pretty intense change that made commercial real estate, for example, in a very bad situation, because that change has changed the entire industry overnight. Now, there are also other things changing happen right now. There's the, generative AIs, and all this could have much a more profound impact than we would ever imagine in a way we also does not expect to happen. So would love hear from you, Perry, like how as a chief product officer, you're so busy, you have a team, you have business, you have customer. How do you stay abreast on the shifting and changing in the market and in our space, and how you would recommend your fellows and team to learn on how to and basically continuously evolve in today's environment?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I was just talking to some of our board members about this. Years ago, there was kind of specialty websites that you'd go to learn about your trait in your field. One of the things that I've found most effective today regarding learning about what's going on within product management, which I don't know when you'd want to say became a segment or something to learn, maybe the last 5 or last 10 years, but the specialty tools are a great place. Dragon Boat has a wealth of knowledge. The CPO series that we're in right now is one way, but that also just on the website, there's really good insights. It's almost less about the features and functionality of the tool, and it's more about the thought leadership of what's going on within the product operations and product management space. Obviously, huge players like Pendo also have a wealth of thought leadership on the subject. And you go down the board on the various product management tools, they all have thought leadership. And I'd highly recommend everyone out there actually go to those websites to learn about the latest in what's going on within product management. Obviously, there's serious decisions and pragmatic marketing, those type of consultancies that have been around since I was fresh out of school. But a lot of the thought leadership now is coming out of companies like Dragon Boat.
That's cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Obviously we try to really bring in the smartest leaders in the space to help each other. I think a chief product officer, believe it or not, even though there are quite a few of them around, but they're really being recognized as the true business drivers are just a couple of recent years. So as we kind of coming up to sort of pretty good portion of the chat today, I would like to just maybe do a couple of rapid fires of things that touch upon things that people care about and impact a lot. One of them is talking about outcome delivery. What kind of the tips and lessons you learned of deliver not just the roadmaps, not just product features? How do you think about outcome delivery? What does it mean to you and your team?
Yeah, typically from a product management perspective, we're brought into conversations to talk about the roadmap. And I think that the biggest tip that I could have is don't start with features and functions. Start with outcomes, start with what's going on in the market, and solicit input and conversation. Make it a conversation with your clients so that you're actually getting to the true business objectives, the true outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And that completely changes the dynamic of the conversation.
Right. That actually makes a lot of sense. That's, sometimes people call it the work backwards method from Amazon or many PIs. Like, obviously, I think Amazon does a really good job. They're really good at PR their own processes, but but the idea really is true that you have to say where we're trying to go to, and then use that to back into it. What the product features. Well, what are some of the sort of things that looks kind of like a logical and like a good practice, but it turned out actually weren't really effective in the way we have to drive outcome and dealing with today's fast moving world? Like things used to work in the past, but no longer work today.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example is what we were talking about before, just in the usage of Excel to achieve certain things. Business leaders want answers in a much more holistic manner than I think that they've asked for in the past. My CEO, my board, and a great example is kind of percent allocation of where the product team is spending their time. And this is the true heart of portfolio management. And it's not just about the individual products, it's about summarizing these things. And kind of the rule, a good example, kind of a rule of thumb is when I think about the investment thesis for where we're spending our time, I'm thinking 20% of my time or the engineering team's time should be spent within innovation. Another 60% from an iterative design of just building out features, and then another 20% just in keeping the lights on. So if we start thinking in those terms, now all of a sudden the question is, how is our investment today matching up against that, and how is it changing over time? You can't do that without a tool. I mean, it would be the overhead would be way too much. And if
Right.
that's what I'm trying to track as a leader, I need to make sure that my tools are connected. And if it's in Jira initially, how could I summarize that in a responsive portfolio management tool?
Right. It's actually very interesting you mentioned, and I want to just call out, I think one of the observation we have seen through the customer we work with and the leaders we talk to is that there are two types of companies. One type of company is very execution driven. They do really good job. They have a high velocity, they close their sprints, and everything does really well. But it's really difficult for if you ask them to say, well, where's the things that drive the most impact to our business and where we should shift things, and it will be very challenging because it's like a bottoms up approach, right? So in the past we have something called a rock, pebble, sand. When you start with a sand, it's very difficult to say I want to move something because you have to move a lot of things to actually make room for something. But if you start look at a portfolio, like you said, at 20%, 20%, and then 60%, then you can say, okay, now we're gonna, the BAU actually is not 20%, for whatever reason, it's 30%. So what we're gonna move. So you have to look at a bigger picture level to say, we're going to, well, unfortunately, we cannot do these things anymore. And then they seems to be doing okay from a business outcome perspective. Let's move them out, deprioritize them now. So that you can do the bigger picture decision making early on. And then because, hey, things happen. 20% BAU is pretty good. I very rarely see company doing that, but anyway, usually it's like a 30, 40. I've seen companies coming 50%, and their CPO say, I can't do anything. Why can't I do anything? I said, well, you look at your BAU, you hope you use that. So don't overplan. It was kind of interesting conversation that, but it's a really, really good tip. Any tips in terms of, any thoughts on product operations and how that role may play out in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think product operations, if product management as a true specialty has come about in the past 15 years, 10, 15 years, product operations is still relatively new. And I think that developing that product operations functionality feature, the center of excellence, is critical for truly answering some of these questions, and setting product operations up with a seat at the table to push the CPO and the leadership team to drive the strategy component, and also strong enough to be able to also drive and make sure that the engineering team is actually doing what they need to do. And then all of a sudden, product operations truly is that center hub of a true product-led growth organization. And at the end of the day, that's what excites me about working on both the strategy side as well as the execution side, and being that center bridge for the leadership team.
You brought up so many great things, and music to my ears, because I have worked with the product operations and chief product officer quite a bit throughout my career. Well, being the product operations since 20 years ago, it's kind of hard to convince the leader in the beginning that you're not going to hire a product operations who's a junior PM who quote unquote cannot make the cut to be PM, and you made that person a product operation. That's a huge mistake, because the product operations is such a high leveraged role that I think that missing the strategy in the job title is very important. And then you said it, Perry, that product ops person should have a seat on the table. That person should be driving from the beginning of a strategic planning and or at least the quarterly planning or the, from a strategy OKR to the roadmap execution planning part is so essential. So what are some of the, speaking of that, what are some of the key characteristic you look for? Do you think a CPO without a product operations compared to a CPO with a very strong product operations, what are some of the pros and cons in terms of operating the organization and run the product business?
Yeah, I think that you hit on a really interesting point on a few things there. To me, it all comes down to scale. Working within kind of having acquired some venture-backed companies, most recently working with some private equity-backed portfolio companies, it all comes down to how do you get scale? And it really is important, and the same thing applies to a Fortune 100 company, because everyone's looking to create scale within their organizations or within their team. And product operations provides a CPO the ability to scale. And what that means is all of a sudden you're bringing analytics to an organization that might not have had the product operations person, the team, creates the scale for the product managers. It creates scale for the engineering team, and it creates scale for the CPO to be able to do more with less, to bring things together, to get uniformity around the whole portfolio. It's not one product doing excellent or another product doing excellent. It's about that portfolio approach and being very responsive portfolio managed, driving scale within an organization. And that's what I love, that is applicable to any industry, any group, especially obviously technology that is looking to make change within an industry.
I love how you mentioned that around the scale part and then bringing data. I think, sometimes people underestimate the impact of quote unquote having visibility, right? A lot of times, like you said, you're going to go to meetings, you're going to get reports. And the main reason is not going to meetings, not creating reports. The main reason is the information you need to make decisions, right? When you can have access to the information, the data, the rigor, then you can make a much better and a faster decision because the data is there, right? Quality access to data, quality of data, real-time access, it enables you to make a quality, fast decisions versus if you have to ask 25 people and they give you different answers, try to figure out what's going on. Yeah, CPO cannot scale. The product organization cannot scale, right? That's definitely makes a lot of sense. So who would make a good product operations?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for me, and this actually it impacts a lot of different type of roles, but someone who's going to ask a lot of questions. To me, if someone is not asking questions, they're not going to get to where they want to go. They're going to be very responsive rather than reactive, or I'm sorry, rather than proactive, they're going to be reactive. So I think asking questions is the first thing, and then someone who's going to get stuff done. It's really important to actually execute on that. And to me, it's the say-do ratio. I'm going to say something and do it, and the people with the highest say-do ratio are the ones that are going to truly get what they need to be done. And that's going to ultimately, as you were saying, it's not about just getting the information. It's about answering the question and actually acting upon that. And the biggest thing is, what are you not going to do? What is not working, and what are you going to stop doing? So then you could take the same amount of resources and actually put it to something that's very effective because you're not doing something else.
You touch upon a few things very important. I want to just double click on them. One of them you mentioned, it's a say-do ratio. I think today there's a good and bad. Sometimes the pendulum swing too far in one direction. At one point people say, oh, we don't want to be feature focused, we don't want to be output focused. True, you cannot only have a feature, you cannot only have output, right? But then people say, okay, we're going to be outcome focused. Then all of a sudden there's a data, there's analysis, that's figure out what to do. Not say it's not important, it's really important, right? You gotta have to figure out what you're gonna do, but you still have to do it. You still have to do it very, very fast. How can you software is about speed, right? So I think that it needs to come together. You need to have a strategy, you need to have outcome, and then you need to be able to execute. And the execution itself, like you mentioned, what we're not going to do, where's the problem, where's the bottleneck, where's dependency, where's the resources, because this will allow you to actually achieve what you need to achieve. I do have, I have a seeing some of a more visionary sort of product approach. Not that's not important, but there's a lot of big ideas, not a lot of things on the strategy, a lot of things about how we want to achieve, how we're going to drive value. And then the execution side completely fall apart. And you're not able to achieve what you wanted to achieve. So I really like how you brought up that ask a lot of questions and understanding where the risks are, and then also understanding ask the questions about what we're not going to do, because it tends to happen is that if we don't ask that question, right, the newest thing is the most important, people just pile it on top of everything else, and then basically the effective prioritization and the allocation decision become opaque. It's someone else making that decision because you give them one more thing on top of the full bucket, so something gonna flow out, and then we have no control what's going to flow out. But if you say, okay, this is not what we're gonna do, gonna trade off this for this, then you actually make an impact, not just for prioritization, right? It's really for the portfolio.
Absolutely.
When you what are some of the cadences as how frequent you do this sort of the goal and strategy alignment? How frequent? You would love to hear your operating cadence that you find the most effective. Maybe varies by size of the company. What are some of the tips around that?
Yeah, from within my product organization, we're constantly looking at those metrics. I mean, we're in some ways we're still in the process of defining what they are, and a lot of it at the highest level ties back to our OKRs for the organization. So we meet monthly to talk about that. I think quarterly is from an executive perspective, making sure that those OKRs are aligned. But then within my product management team, during my one-on-ones, I will constantly talk about kind of where we're at on those things, and that a lot of it goes back to there's a question about making roadmap adjustments. A lot of that goes back to exactly where we're at with the OKRs, setting up the OKRs, looking at how the roadmap ties to that. The biggest adjustment outside of that comes in where there's specific customer requests that come in to disrupt the roadmap. Going back to the 20-60-20 rule, I'm trying to allocate my resources and leave slack in the process to make those adjustments. So hopefully the strategic roadmap doesn't get impacted, but more of the day-to-day roadmap, there is adjustments there that we can make for specific customer inquiries. But that is looked at constantly. So starting at that level, it's something that's constantly a focus to make sure that we're, as a product management team, a product ops team, responsive to what's going on with our customers and then the market. And then quarterly looking at our OKRs and making sure that the numbers tie back. So I'm actually in the process right now of going through a quarterly business review with my engineering and product organization to say, what did we say when we first started? And then where are we at now? And we'll do that on a quarterly basis. And we have a deck that we prepare that we're fleshing out that all ties back to the outcomes and strategy that we talked about 45 minutes ago.
This is awesome. Now, obviously, to make everything work, that not only you have a great, portfolio focus, outcome focus, and then portfolio aware chief product officer, and then you have a very effective product operations, and then you have a really effective cadence in quarterly, monthly, right, strategic and operational tied together. Now, when do you think it's a good time to think about bringing a dedicated product operations person? The size of team, the complexity, what would that person be focusing on? In your mind, how does it work?
So I worked at Accenture for the first 5 years of my career out of undergrad. It all depends, right?
Right.
I think if you start looking at a small company, VC backed, they're still trying to find product market fit. So they're still experimenting. Even then, you could start bringing metrics into the conversation of where you're spending your time, because you definitely want to understand how that profile is changing, and where you're spending your time and investments. But as you scale, and as you're asking different questions about your asset allocation, about your investment allocation, how are you spending your time? Where's your efforts going? And you're struggling to answer those questions, or it's taking too much time from a product management and a product operations perspective for the CPO, then you should start considering it. When you have multiple product managers all doing something differently, when you have multiple product managers all having different roadmaps with different information, and you start having disparate components, and you're trying to bring it all together in a portfolio, boom, product operations is going to be able to help that.
Right. And I think it's really, really common to hear that, I like how you break it down to say when you product market fit, you're just trying to figure out when you come to a certain scale, either multiple product teams, or you have multiple roadmaps, they're connected, but not exactly. It makes a lot of sense. And the other one is interesting. I'm not sure the you experienced in the past is that related to scaling is the product management best practice, meaning you build a PDLC, you also need to work with a cross-functional team to bring product to market. There's GTM part of things that also needs like quite a bit of, quote unquote extra work. Have you seen things like that? Like, would that be part of the consideration as well?
Absolutely. And to me, that is a key part of product operations, because the product manager needs to make that alignment with the rest of the organization. And one of the things that we recently launched within Symphony Talent is go-to-market product organizations, where they bring cross-functional people together. So it's sales, it's customer support, it's service, it's engineering, and we have 6 different products, and they're all sitting across and having kind of slightly different meetings. The product operations team sits right at the center, and if we're able to show Dragon Boat and talk about the backlog of features and capabilities that we want to bring to market, what are we delivering not only in this quarter, next quarter, and outer quarters, but what's in the backlog, and what are the big features that we have. And if every single meeting is leveraging the same data in the same manner, that's all powered by product operations. So that's when you start really putting things together to generate that scale that's necessary to grow an organization.
This is awesome. I know that we're coming out of time. I wish we have more time. Just in case you want to know more and talk to Perry, here's where you can find him on LinkedIn. And a couple more information or resources you have here, both including on-demand and upcoming webinars, as well as, about responsive PPM and responsive PPM ebook. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thanks to Perry for such an insightful conversation today. And to learn more about Dragon Boat and the Chief Product Officer resources, you may go to dragonboat.io/CPO. We're all out of time. Thanks, everyone. And then we'll be in touch and talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Becky. Have a great day.
Thank you.